Hello everyone. Welcome to IMC Licensing's fall webinar on inbound licensing for manufacturers and brand owners. I'm Robert Heverin, a licensing sales associate at IMC, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, which will be hosted by IMC's CEO, Stephen Riley, and IMC's Vice President of Licensing Sales, Todd Donaldson. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send them to the email address at the bottom of each screen, and Stephen and Todd will do their best to answer all of them at the end of the 30-minute webinar. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to Stephen to start the program.
Thanks, Robert, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be here with Todd Donaldson, our Vice President of Licensing Sales, and hope that we can provide some useful illustrations of ways to think about inbound licensing as we see it going on in the world, and we very much hope you'll send in your questions. We have a great group of attendees to this webinar this afternoon, and look forward to getting your questions, which we'll start answering about half an hour for the final 10 or 15 minutes of our time together this afternoon. Just to tell you a little bit about what we're going to try to cover this afternoon is we're just going to address inbound licensing from three different perspectives. One, from a manufacturer who's looking at licensing to develop a unique branded product. Another from, again, a manufacturer, but one who is looking at licensing to pair with its own brand in a co-branded partnership. And finally, briefly licensing as carried out by retailers, or retail exclusive licensing. Todd's going to talk a little bit about how we see people evaluating inbound licensing opportunities. Licensing always presents some risks on both sides, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those risks from a licensee's perspective and how to manage those. And then, as I said, we'll enter into a little Q&A. Just briefly to introduce IMC Licensing, many of you know who we are. We are a licensing agency that's focused primarily on developing great new consumer products for consumer product brand owners. Some of our current clients are listed on the slide you see right before you. We have a lot of clients in the food and beverage space, which is by far the largest piece of the brand licensing pie. But on behalf of those brands, we execute deals in food categories as well as cosmetics, apparel, housewares, and any number of other categories. Obviously, our business is fundamentally representing licensors or the owners of brands. So as we talk about how we come to be talking about inbound licensing, it's fitting that Todd's going to launch the presentation this afternoon, because as our Vice President of Licensing Sales, he's engaged in a very deliberate licensee development process on the part of IMC, whereby we reach out to manufacturers even before we have opportunities to sell them, because it's important for us and our clients to understand the needs of prospective licensees in every category all across the country. And through that, I think we've gained some unique understandings in how the offerings of our clients, their brands that they want to license into categories, can help better meet the needs of the manufacturers we need to partner with successfully.
Thanks, Stephen. We often talk about how strategy comes into play for licensors, but there's also should be a strategy that comes in place for potential licensees. We'll look at a few of those strategies that some companies have undertaken, and then how you might be able to apply those to your business. First of all, why do manufacturers license? Through lifestyle appeal, flavor, or implied quality, licensing gives a consumer a reason to trust and desire a new product. It offers a manufacturer, say with a strong regional presence, the opportunity to go to a national level. It offers an opportunity for a manufacturer to piggyback on a brand's advertising and marketing strategy and dollars. And it can make your product stand out in a commoditized area. Offers leverage with retailers, an opportunity to get your way into a retailer, to take shelf space away maybe from someone else. And lastly, it captures important trends in the marketplace, a quick way to get to market with a very hot trend, say either in today's market could be organic or green products. Here we have a few examples of companies that you may not recognize some of the names on the left, but you certainly will recognize some of the products they have in the marketplace. First, there's Birchwood. It's actually a retail division of Kenosha Beef. They work closely with NASCAR. Have launched the hamburger patty, which is featured at many retailers right now. They also work with Disney on a couple of levels. They are the supplier for Kroger with the Disney products that Kroger has utilized, but they also, outside of Kroger, have a different Disney brand on hamburger patties available at other retailers. ArQuest is a longtime leader in the store brand diaper category, and they acquired a licensed product from Scholastic of Clifford the Dog, and they actually offer Clifford brand to their retailers on their store brands. Hood is a regional brand, very strong in the Northeast, that through the use of licensing has reached out on a national basis with many, many products. And Lifetime Brands, they're one of the largest manufacturers of home and kitchen accessories. In order to take a brand upstairs at a higher price point, they actually acquired the KitchenAid for a lot of home products as well.
We're going to talk about some leading examples that illustrate companies that have, as inbound licensees, have taken advantage of some of the trends and reasons for inbound licensing that Todd described. The Sunkist Soda program is a very important part of the Cadbury Schweppes business line. I like it particularly because it has a very interesting kind of history of inbound licensing. The first licensee, and the licensor in this case, is Sunkist Growers, the large orange growing farming co-op in California. The first licensee for orange soda in 1965 was the General Cinema Corporation, which wanted to be able to deliver a distinctive beverage in its movie theaters for kids and adults. They initially launched it into a broader marketplace, and that program was acquired by Cadbury Schweppes in the late 1980s. Cadbury, of course, the third largest soft drink manufacturer in the world, it has generally, this is its only large-scale license. It's generally gone out and bought brands when it wanted to grow, like Dr. Pepper and 7-Up and Snapple, which it now owns. And yet this is obvious. This has been a brilliant licensing license for Cadbury, as it has been for those who held it before Cadbury. It's by far the #1 orange soda brand in the country. It has a 30% or higher than a 30% market share in the category, whereas a player like Coke with Minute Maid and Fanta has only been able to capture a 10% share. So I think it's a great example where an inbound license can deliver the equities, in this case an orange equity, excellent execution, but really in consumers' minds, no brand has equaled this, and Cadbury has really made it the Gatorade of the orange soda category.
Here we have an example of a product actually that you may not realize is a licensed product, a very natural extension of the Green Giant brand, trusted for years in the canned vegetable category. And General Mills, through a license, here we have an example of just one. There's a company called Patanda that actually stands for potatoes and onions that do a couple of these products in the line. They're actually part of a larger group, Green Giant Fresh and the Shoal Group, that do multiple vegetables up in the fresh produce area. And it's an opportunity where it's an area of fresh produce that does not have did not have a brand that was available on a national basis. It was more of a commoditized, but upon relying on the Green Giant reliability and recognized character in the Green Giant himself, was able to reach out and identify with consumers in this way.
Sometimes licensing can fill a gap for a manufacturer. Sometimes it can create a whole business, as in this case. We believe the Green Giant Fresh program generates between $500 million and $1 billion a year at retail under that brand name. Another example of a business that was really built around a licensing concept is the company Pet Brands, which was a licensee of Milk-Bone as well as 9 Lives and other pet brands that have now been consolidated under Del Monte's ownership. The founders of Pet Brands identified, they weren't the only ones, but they felt very strongly about the growth potential in the $40 billion pet accessory industry. And they realized that licensing would be a way to create instant consumer awareness for a brand new company. They were right, because their program is now generating tens of millions of dollars in retail sales. They also were very clever in identifying pet-oriented brands that were previously, if not unlicensed, under-licensed. So they were broadly available in the categories of pet accessories, unlike some pet brands that had been, as we say in licensing, sort of sliced and diced into a lot of different categories, which wouldn't have given the same opportunity to a startup company as Milk-Bone did for pet brands. Todd talked about taking advantage of trends. And another point we hope to make very clear here is inbound licensing is very important for small and mid-sized manufacturers, but it's equally important for some of the largest manufacturers in the country. In this case, the $30+ billion Kraft Foods wanted to find its way to have a stronger presence in the health and wellness sector. It did not own a brand in that space, and I suspect as it looked around, it didn't see an attractive enough brand to buy. So what it did is it licensed the South Beach Diet name onto an extensive line of healthy and better-for-you products, and in so doing, launched the #1 new product line in the supermarket last year in '06, generating over $230 million of sales, not including Walmart. So a great example of how even one of the strongest companies in its own space used inbound licensing very successful to continue the kind of growth it needs to achieve.
Here we're looking at Heinz, the company in ketchup and pretty much the owner in the sauce category. But when they looked at their portfolio, what they did not have was a strong barbecue equity or an offering in that area, and especially at the premium level. So they couldn't just go out and put Heinz on a barbecue sauce and expect to compete with other premium sauces out there. So in order to get to that price point, they looked at the Jack Daniel's brand and went primarily with a wholly branded product there, identified very much a lifestyle brand but strong flavor equities as well. And so from that, they're actually built off the barbecue sauce into marinades and steak sauces.
And as a result, Todd, I think, as you know, in a generally flat category, they have been one of the 1 or 2 brands achieving actual real growth in the category with this license.
Exactly.
Another company, kind of along the theme of the companies that are built around a license, the Brinkmann Corporation, which is a premier manufacturer of grills and other products. Actually, the owner is a big-time hunter, and they actually identified the opportunity to acquire the Remington brand, one of the most significant hunting and gun firearm brands, as the sole apparel licensee. So they've built an entire apparel company around a single license without presenting any of their own branded products, really being Remington's apparel partner. Another strategy to achieve breadth and dominance through inbound licensing.
Here we're looking at the Olay vitamin program, and this is actually run by a company called PharmaVite. Owns its own Nature's Way brand that's rather well known in some channels, very organic vitamin, some additional products in that area, but they also identified a trend in anti-aging, which they really could not go into. They could make the claims but not have an immediate recognition by the consumer. So in launching the Olay vitamin program, they were able to communicate to the consumer the anti-aging effects, which is definitely Olay's message, reach new channels that took them out of the organic or homeopathic areas and over into other areas of the HBA area.
Another big daddy of inbound licensing was the use by Sultan Corporation of George Foreman's name in the George Foreman Grill, a program that began in 1995, is still going, not quite as strong because there are not many more people left who haven't bought a George Foreman grill. But the company, we believe, has sold in the range of 75 million George Foreman grills since 1995. This presents a risk I'll talk about a little later, that the program became so much more successful than either George Foreman or Sultan, I think, had ever envisioned, that in 1999 Sultan realized they needed to put a cap on the ongoing royalty it owed George Foreman, so it paid him $127 million and $10 million in their company's stock in perpetuity to lock up the license and not to have to pay him more ongoing royalties.
The Flanders Corporation existed in a space with filters that was sometimes dominated by manufacturers that people identified with the company that manufactured their HVAC systems for their home or on a commercial basis. Very strong commercial presence, but not much at retail. And when they were there, it was very spotty. So they looked for a brand that could take them on a national level. And over the years, they've actually licensed 2 different brands, both the Arm & Hammer brand, which still exists in the filters area, and they also licensed Lysol, which I believe they've recently let expire.
Right. And that's an example of how even a strong company can fare very differently with 2 different licenses. Arm & Hammer both had a more natural equity fit here, and sometimes it's just hard to actually do the same thing twice. And so they were not able to achieve the same success with Lysol as they did with Arm & Hammer. The second category of inbound licensing we're going to talk is co-branding. So really the question being, why do people who already own a strong brand in the same category actually find licensing appealing to add another brand to their brand? And again, some of the same reasons Todd mentioned, that it's a way to reach new or specified niche target markets. Many people who engage in co-branding are participants in a mature category. So they're trying to find ways to attract consumer attention to their product line. The co-brand can be a way to extend an existing product line, and it can support an equity that the brand lacks on its own. A product like Kellogg's Keebler Division's Cheez-Its brand has great equities on its own, but when it wants to deliver a spicy Cheez-It, it needs to co-brand with Tabasco to generate real consumer legitimacy, and that co-brand is very successful. Finally, brand owners will often co-brand, as we talked about with Kraft and the South Beach line, to fill a gap in where there might not be a brand that they can find themselves in a position to buy or acquire. Again, some of the largest companies in the world, co-branding is not just a game for the mid-size or smaller tier companies, although it can be a big one for them. Some of the biggest companies in the world are active co-branded licensees, from Unilever to Toyota. In the apparel section, even a brand like Paul Frank with its distinctive Julius the Monkey character has delivered some very inventive and successful lines of co-branded licensees with Oscar Mayer and John Deere. Todd talked about how Lifetime Brands had actually used a license from KitchenAid to elevate its product offerings into a higher price point. You can go upstairs or downstairs. All-Clad wanted to attract consumers at kind of more of an entry price point level, but did not want to do that in a way that impaired its very, very strong market position at higher end. So it actually licensed Emeril, and taking advantage of his mainstream appeal with entry-level consumers, to develop an Emeril chef-branded line of All-Clad pots that has allowed them to maintain strength at all different price points in their industry.
Looking at Jack Link's, a company that rode the low-carb craze to extreme heights and actually have maintained that and developed a great awareness of their own brand name, most recently even with their Sasquatch, messing with Sasquatch marketing message, have very experienced licensors, but found a gap in their offerings. They had built their own name up to a great height, had licensed in KC Masterpiece, very strong barbecue equity, but still found a space in there, that a niche market they could not reach. And just launching a Jack Link's steak sauce nugget did not make sense. So in acquiring the A1 brand for this product, a brand with a very loyal following, a very distinct flavoring, they created a great new product. Here's a really interesting one. Star Wars, the granddaddy of licensors that really gave rise to the entertainment industry, brought a lot of attention to it, developed a long-time relationship with Lego, and in doing that they were able to reach a kind of a new target audience to make the Star Wars legacy films and the new films more relevant to an age group that my son only heard about it from me until he was able to get old enough to see about the movies, but always loved playing with the Lego toys. And in doing that, they created a relationship. On the right, you see actually a computer game that, in turn, LucasArts, which is a division of Lucasfilms had licensed Star Wars to Lego. They licensed Lego back in for the game. And in doing this, they had a lot of success over the years with games targeted at adults through role-playing, but they needed to target a game towards that age demographic again, and by licensing Lego back in to make it more of a fun, playful, building experience, they're able to reach that demographic. So you actually have a licensed product giving rise to another licensed product, and in this case, it goes back to the licensor. Reebok, in order to ride the trend of very colorful sneakers, and to do so quickly, looked at a company with an existing color palette that was very familiar to consumers. So in acquiring the Kool-Aid brand, they would get vibrant colors, a face that was recognizable to make it fun and playful, and just a color palette that was not available anywhere else. A very unique program.
There are two leading manufacturers in packaged ice cream, Unilever and Nestle, and they have very different strategies for inbound licensing. Unilever has identified licensing as a very important way to garner and maintain attention for what is a solidly mature category. It licenses a host of confectionery brands like Oreo for cookies and cream ice cream, Hershey, M&M, Mrs. Fields, and also uses it to target specific demographics. This year it announced an extensive line of new Goya ice cream flavors targeted at the Latino market and those who like those flavors as well. Todd talked about how Actually, Lego used Star Wars in a way to get an older child interested in its products. A company like Bonnie Bell, a major domestic manufacturer of cosmetics for the sort of teen and upper teen market, used licensing to add novelty to actually reach the younger tween market for its products. So licensing, it's co-branded because they license their Lip Smackers line together with brands like Skittles and Jell-O and Kool-Aid to actually deliver novelty to a new target market for them.
Ford is an interesting company to look at, that in order to take a premium price product such as their Explorer and Expeditions up to higher levels without placing the burden on their dealers to upsell on packages, they came up with the Eddie Bauer idea. Tapped into a lifestyle, a known brand name established for quite some time, to place that package, and had quite a bit of success with that, and actually almost revived and made the Eddie Bauer brand more relevant than it had ever been, and pretty much saved the brand. And even beyond that, they offer a King Ranch edition. King Ranch, established farm in Texas, have had an existing catalog business for quite many years, but even above the Eddie Bauer offering, they have a super premium King Ranch package with full leather, all kinds of goodies on the outside as well that have really been able to do that.
Sometimes a licensee, a company looks at inbound licensing as an idea to develop a new product around. Sometimes they look for the equity to actually help give a name to a product they've already developed. In this case, Popsicle, Unilever's Popsicle division, had developed the capacity to make a 5-flavor stacked popsicle, and had actually had some experience trying to market that on their own with no unique brand name. And then they recognized that there was a brand out there that delivered the equities of a 5-flavored roll stacked in one place, and that was Lifesavers. And since they relaunched the same product under the Lifesavers name, this became the #1 popsicle product this year, as well as allowing Popsicle the opportunity to deliver a sugar-free version like the brand itself does. Finally, another category in which licensing has become almost necessary is in kids' toothpastes. Toothpaste manufacturers and oral care divisions in general depend on children's entertainment properties to satisfy parents and make toothbrushing attractive to their kids.
We felt it important to take a look at what retailers are doing. Licensees are being threatened because retailers are now starting to strike direct deals with brand owners. And being able to leverage those kind of opportunities, it's really good to understand what they are doing. And why are the retailers licensing? It offers them a product or a brand exclusive that's not available at another retailer. Allows them to support multiple price points. They may have their store brand at a value, and offering something that's a good or better with an appropriate brand can kind of come underneath what the best market may be on the market in a particular category. You can reach a new or specific target. This could be a demographic, an age group. Within that, it could be an ethnic group that you're able to reach with that specific target, much like Kohl's has done with Daisy Fuentes. And it offers leverage against the manufacturers as well, that they don't have to pay slotting fees for their own products to go on shelves, and so it offers them a chance to maybe even horn out manufacturers on some of that shelf space. Here we have some examples of what just some retailers have done. CVS has taken Playskool, acquired that brand just for baby products. Ellen LeVar in hair care. And Walmart is a very unique example. They don't do a lot of exclusive licensing, but one of the things we can take a look at, GE Appliances, the small appliances program there has been rather large for them, available only at Walmart and actually at walmart.com. Walmart also owns the White Cloud brand. It's really a unique operation. Procter & Gamble abandoned the brand. A company acquired it, so they actually license it for toilet paper, but they own the brand for diapers.
Talk about a specific a specific retailer and how they've used inbound licensing aggressively. The $13 billion Michigan-based Meijer Corporation, which was sort of the granddaddy of supercenters even before Walmart got into that business in the upper Midwest, has structured a unique relationship with the Garfield brand under Paws Incorporated to develop dozens of Garfield-branded products to offer across the store. So inbound licensing for Meijer, as it does for others retailers, allows it to control exclusively a brand that its competitors can offer, and also offers it a chance to obtain the brand more broadly and deliver it across the store to add greater value, really in much the way that Kroger is attempting to do with the Disney Magic Selections brand in the last year or so across so many categories. Martha Stewart has had retail exclusive relationships with most major retailers by this point, Kmart, Sears, and now Macy's. This spring announced the new Martha Stewart collection, not to be confused with Martha Stewart Every Day at Kmart. It looks like what's happening here is that Macy's is actually taking its part in trying to become the replacement licensee for Kmart, whose license expires in 2009. Kmart this year, their guaranteed payments to Martha Stewart have really dug itself into a hole, peak at $65 million, which Kmart will owe Martha Stewart this year, which is probably about double the royalties that it's going to generate on an earned basis for that line. They'll start declining next year, and what it's likely to imagine is that Macy's will start to move in with Martha and, again, quite remarkably accomplishing what many people say is not possible, is actually moving a brand upstairs over time rather than making it, taking it more to the masses.
When looking at inbound opportunities, just look at a few things on how you might evaluate the opportunity. First of all, there's brand power. What is the brand awareness of the equity you're looking at, the advertising, promotional, and marketing plans of the brand? If the shoe fits, how closely does the equity you're looking at, how does it fit your goals, your plans? Does it make sense as a viable product in your space? Catching the wave, ride that trend, whether it currently be organic or green, you can catch the wave. I say go green, I mean evergreen, that is. On the flip side of catching the wave, look at an equity or a brand that's been around for 100 years. The message stays the same, the consumer stays the same. You can take that and turn that into an evergreen product. And don't forgo your gut feeling. Sometimes you can look at something and just say, that makes sense, and don't ignore that, but don't put too much stock in it either. And lastly, we're talking about risky business. In addition to the financial risk of launching a new product, there are several other risks that Stephen will now talk a little bit about.
Right. I think we see a lot of companies, interestingly, getting a lot more sophisticated about evaluating inbound licensing, and we think that's a good thing. I think historically many of them have simply grabbed what they saw. They felt they just had to have a film property in a given year and hoped they were picking a winner, and they've seen a lot of dollars go down the drain that way. And I think now many are trying to structure better long-term relationships. So we're going to talk a little about the risks that you can avoid when structuring those. Some of those relate to transactions that either you as a licensee or the licensed brand may undergo. Others relate to trying to manage the risks that you can't control yourself, ones that are caused by others. And finally, how to address the sort of sometimes unspoken risk, but one we think it's better to address, a possible competition between the licensee and the licensor. First, the transactional risk. What I really mean to talk about here are two risks. One in which there's been a lot of M&A activity, mergers and acquisition activity in the last few years with private equity companies, firms gobbling up companies, and there's an increased risk that the firm you license, whose equity or property you license from, may itself actually be sold while you're under that license agreement. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be. It might mean that the company, the acquiring company, doesn't support licensing in the same way. It's almost sure to mean you're going to be dealing with a whole new team of people. Things to consider, some of them are hard to obtain given the bargaining power of some licensors, but typically a licensor requires approval for a licensee to assign its agreement to someone else. You might ask the licensee to give you approval for assignment. And even if they won't give you that much, you might ask for the right to opt out of the agreement or limit your obligations if the company itself sells the brand you're licensing. And again, somehow try to think about some kind of key man protection, whether you won't have the right to get out of the deal if the people who supported the deal are no longer working with you as a partner. Second, and really a bigger risk as you structure agreements, and I think there's more leeway, is how to address the fact of whether you yourself as a licensee might want to sell your company or the division that's doing the licensing. As I said, most licensors want the right to prohibit that sale, or at least to prohibit the the license traveling with it, which presents a very big risk to you. In fact, we've heard from a number of private equity companies that firms that they're very wary of investing in companies that depend excessively on licensing because they need to be guaranteed a way to sell and exit that business, and sometimes the license can actually be a restraint on that. One way out of that also is to ask the licensor, so you understand that it may be that they don't want you selling out to their biggest competitors, but they might be willing to grant broader discretion about letting you sell your business to people who aren't on that short list. The risks of the events beyond your control. The first is really fading fads. A number of companies lost their shirts to Atkins a few years ago in terms of guaranteed royalties. They promised in license agreements that were suddenly worthless when the Atkins craze faded almost faster than it had come on the stage. There are ways to minimize this. Some of these are more familiar actually in film licensing, where as a licensee you can actually establish some criteria or guarantees that trigger your guarantees. So as in the film business, licensees' obligations usually are triggered by the launch of the film by a certain date, by the number of screens that it goes on. You too, say if you were licensing Atkins, you might have said, well, our guaranteed royalties will decline as your presence, the brand's presence at retail declines. Second, just be really careful in anything that looks like it might be a fad to limit your long-term obligations. Second is something, licensors are often focused on how a licensee could harm their brand. It's also important to realize that as an inbound licensee, the brand owner could harm the brand itself, and other licensees could harm the brand in a way that you have nothing to do about, but that diminishes the value of the brand or property you valued. If you were a licensee of Thomas the Tank Engine this year, I think it's very likely that you would have seen a negative impact on your business because of the recall, the lead paint recall of trains sold by another Thomas licensee, RC2. RC2 is a reputable company, but the problem they found themselves in, I'm sure, has hurt other licensees of Thomas the Tank Engine, a great long-term brand. And there may be ways to protect that under contract. Secondly, you may actually want to protect yourself if the brand itself you're licensing attracts negative publicity. That's easy to understand in the realm of personalities like Paris Hilton and Don Imus, who had license agreements that had been hurt by their scandals. But that can happen to corporate brands and trademarks as well. Finally, something we think it's better to address up front is what I call competition between the licensor and the licensee. And what I really mean here is situations where the licensor may, for any number of reasons, start moving into what you as an inbound licensee perceives as your turf. One of the ways we talked about the deals like the Remington apparel deal or the Milk-Bone pet accessories deal, where there's almost a sole licensee who's broadly responsible for an entire category. That actually creates a lot more safety for them as licensees, that they won't be invaded either by other licensees or by the brand owner itself. So try to look for opportunities where you can define the category you're licensing broadly, or at least obtain a right of first refusal on new brand extensions that you might be able to take responsibility for. Address these risks up front. We see more companies actually being willing to engage in very deliberate buyout clauses or options, and understand that it may be appealing for the brand owner to actually get into the business that the licensee has proven for them. If you acknowledge that up front, you might actually build in valuation formulas, as we've seen in some agreements, that gives them the right to buy it back from you, or gives the licensee the opportunity to be a co-packer in some cases for the brand owner. We'll talk about this. Well, it's a good time to mention that actually the best time to think about ways to avoid these risks are when your license agreement is going well. That's the time when everybody's happy, and it's more likely for the brand owner to extend the rights offered to the licensee, whether in terms of the years under agreement. And it might actually be worth something for the licensee, now that it knows the value of the license has been established, to offer something more in exchange to the brand owner in order to avoid these risks going forward. So now we're going to move forward. I know we've gotten some questions in, and Robert's going to read them, and then Todd or I will take a stab at answering them. And if you please keep sending them in, we'll answer them as we keep going.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Okay, the first question we have here says, I'm already a top player in my category. What is a license going to do to help me?
I'll take that one. Say, for example, you own a 50% share. Licensing may even get you to a 55% share of your category, or launch a new product that your brand alone can't support. Some other things that licensing in can do for you: you can stave off the competition. If a category is becoming crowded, you can use it to differentiate your product, to stake out your shelf space that the competition can't get in on. And if it's executed properly, a program will generate significant sales numbers and actually solidify a larger position for you at retail.
Thanks, Todd. I'll just go ahead and read the next question. We've had some come in on email, and this one came over the chat line, and I'm a little closer to it. Here, one of the attendees says, for a regional brand trying to go national or to co-brand with a national brand, this person senses that the minimums are massive and often out of reach. Too scary. We understand that. Talk about how to grow into something like that financially. Can a regional brand realistically license in a national brand without feeling that they're just bootstrapping a smaller player? We actually do think that's possible. It is tougher. It is true that we sit on the other side of the table a lot, and we don't hide the fact that we're trying to capture large-scale guarantees and commitments from powerful players for our clients. But we also know that there are times where our clients do choose smaller companies to partner with, even if their guarantees are lower, if they're persuaded that that company is really going to make the most of the opportunity and be a great partner. So I guess what I would say is that, and we actually see a number of regional companies playing that role of being very, very strong licensees because of what the licenses mean to them, what those brands, inbound brands, mean. Todd talked about a company like HP Hood that was really limited to New England until it really saw the ability to be a strong licensing partner as a way to expand nationally. I can tell you that they've been viewed as a very strong partner by some of the companies we work with. So I would not give up. I would. I think that companies are open to formulations that are built on the premise of success, but you're really going to have to believe in yourself and the ability for what that license, inbound license, can do for you as a regional company. And I do think it's possible then to creatively structure a deal that shows them that that license is going to be so valuable to you as a manufacturer that you're going to be a great partner for them. That's a great question.
Okay, going to the next one via email. If I'm committing to a guarantee based on certain accounts taking my program, what happens if I can't sell into those key accounts?
That is a great question, and you know, this has become increasingly important with the consolidation of retailers. And you know, we work with licensees every day. I know Todd does, who make the projections, but their projections are based on 90% of their sales are going to be in 2 or 3 accounts. So you lose one of those. One of those doesn't happen, you may lose half your sales, and yet we're asking you, our clients are often asking for guarantees. We do see some creative ways to structure that. Some can be, the brands also want some level of commitment, but you can do, we have seen sliding scales based on, sell-in, really something we expect them to determine pretty early on, though, not that if you have a bad year, we're going to change the terms, simply that say, okay, we're going to grant the license for you to go out and try and sell it, but we understand that if Walmart's not going to buy in this category, we're looking at probably a different relationship than we would otherwise. So sometimes we actually have a Walmart guarantee with and without Walmart. So I do think there are ways to handle that. It's not easy, but it's something I think both parties are increasingly acknowledging as they realize the dependence on a very limited number of accounts.
Okay, moving to the next one. Will selling products under brand X take away from my core business sales?
If you develop a product that does one or more of the things that we've talked about, that really differentiates itself, ties into a lifestyle, a core equity, it almost always results in incremental sales. Say you're a private label manufacturer or have a value brand, offering a product at a different price point will not take away from your core sales. If you are a manufacturer that's looking to co-brand, if you're going to offer something that's very unique that your competitors don't offer, that really cannot be offered under your own brand, it should just result in incremental sales. And we're seeing that through many of those examples. It could be the price points, it could be a flavor equity, it could be a lifestyle that you can reach that you cannot reach under your own brand.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And it's, if our company knows more about the category than the licensor, why does the licensor have the final say on many decisions?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, I think my answer for that is sort of twofold. Unfortunately, because that's the way it is. If you're, the bad news of inbound licensing is you are licensing, generally a more powerful brand. In some cases, there's somebody who has a lot of, has the ability to control you, and their brands are very important to them. That said, it is a very important job of the licensee or the licensing agency, is the role we find ourselves in, or the internal licensing people, to make the case to the brand that's being licensed, to make sure they understand that the licensee is the expert in their category. And we think the point that's not worth conceding is to let the brand that's doing the licensing start believing that they have become the expert in a category just because they've licensed into it. That's very easy to happen for them, and we think it's just really important early on that the licensee makes sure they're making their case to keep reminding the licensor, the brand owner, that the licensee, the inbound licensee, is really knows more about its category and is there to help the brand owner understand the category as part of their relationship. Robert, will you just address the issue? We've gotten some questions about getting a copy of the presentation as we wrap up. So
yes, certainly. We will be posting the webinar to our website by the end of the week. So please check back there and download your copy of it. Thank you, Stephen and Todd, and thank you all for participating in today's webinar. If you have any further questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to Stephen or Todd, whose contact information is on the screen in front of you. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar this winter. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.